Welcome, Untamed Hearts. You've returned to Tales by Jenny Moon, a place where the wild waits, where every heartbeat can be hunted, and every touch carries danger. Tonight's story will stir your senses, tempt you with desire, and bind you to alphas, fated mates, and the hunger that never lets go. But remember, every choice has its cost. Mark your presence with the pack. Like, comment, subscribe, share. So the night knows you're here, and the stories know where to find you. Stay close, Untamed Heart. The night has already chosen you.
Untamed hearts, answer me this. What is more cruel, to be born unloved or to be born unchosen by fate itself? Ilara had asked herself this question every night of her 20 years. In a world where strength was measured by the howl of your wolf, she had none. No wolf, no shifting, no midnight song beneath the silver moon. The other Omegas mocked her for it, sneering whenever she walked past, whispering the word like a curse, wolfless, as if it stripped her of blood, of worth, of soul. That morning was no different. The training field echoed with grunts and howls, warriors shifting into glossy-coated beasts that snapped at one another with wild grace. Ilara stood at the edge, her chest heavy with longing. She tried not to stare too hard, but she couldn't help it. The freedom, the power, the belonging of shifting was something she had craved since her first breath, and every time, the emptiness inside her chest reminded her of what she lacked. Still standing there like a shadow, one Omega girl sneered, her voice sharp as a whip. "Don't you get tired of pretending you belong here, Ilara? No wolf, no worth, just a burden." Laughter followed. The words pierced, though Ilara kept her spine straight. She would not let them see her cry. Not today. "Enough!" The voice cut through the laughter like a blade, deep and commanding. Kaelen, the Alpha's son, her fated mate, or so she had been told. Kaelen stood tall, his training tunic clinging to his broad shoulders, his skin still shimmering faintly from his shift. His dark hair clung damply to his brow, eyes glowing faintly gold, the mark of his Alpha bloodline. Even among warriors, he was magnetic, dangerous, breathtaking. "Is this what strength looks like?" he asked the Omegas who had laughed, his voice low and edged. "Mocking someone weaker than you? Pathetic." The laughter died instantly. Heads lowered. No one dared challenge him. Heat flushed Ilara's cheeks. It wasn't the first time Kaelen had defended her, but each time it carved deeper into her chest, making it harder to breathe. She hated that she wanted his protection, hated that her heart leapt like a fool's every time he turned his eyes on her. When the others scattered, Kaelen strode toward her. "You shouldn't let them get to you," he murmured, stopping close enough that she could smell the earth and cedar on his skin. "They don't matter. You do." Her throat tightened. "Easy for you to say. You're Kaelen. You're an Alpha. No one dares whisper against you." His golden gaze softened. "Ilara." His hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch sent fire rippling through her, so soft and fleeting she almost leaned into it. Almost. "You don't need a wolf," he whispered, his voice thick with something unspoken. "You already have my heart." Her lips parted. For one breathless moment, the world seemed to stop. His eyes dropped to her mouth, lingering there, and her pulse thundered. The air between them tightened, heavy with something forbidden, dangerous. His face drew closer, close enough she felt the ghost of his breath against her lips. But he didn't close the distance. He pulled back, jaw clenching, as though restraining himself. The moment shattered, leaving Ilara dizzy, her heart aching with both longing and frustration. That night, Ilara lay in her small chamber, staring at the ceiling beams. Kaelen's words echoed in her mind, warming and wounding her all at once. "You already have my heart." She lifted her wrist to her face. Her breath caught. A faint glow pulsed beneath her skin, spreading into the shape of a mark she had never seen before. It was subtle at first, like silver fire beneath the surface. Then it pulsed again, stronger, She gasped, clutching her wrist. The glow faded after a few moments, leaving only silence and questions gnawing at her soul. What was happening to her? As the night deepened, exhaustion finally tugged at her eyes. She drifted into sleep, but it wasn't peaceful. The air felt heavy, charged with something unseen. Then, Ilara. The whisper was soft, hushed, curling into her ear as though spoken just beside her bed. Her eyes snapped open, heart slamming against her ribs. She sat up, breath sharp in the stillness. Ilara. The voice again, low and beckoning. It wasn't Kaelen's voice. It wasn't any voice she knew. It came from the forest. Her gaze turned toward the window, to where the trees loomed dark and endless under the silver moon. Shadows stirred there, restless, as if something waited for her. She clutched her glowing wrist, her pulse racing. The forest did not sleep. Even when Ilara pressed her palms hard against her ears, the whisper clung to her, threading through her skin like a living thing. Ilara, her name. The sound curled through the shadows, coaxing, warning. She should have been terrified. Instead, she was restless, like the whisper had stirred something inside her that had always been waiting to wake. By morning, the voice was gone, leaving her hollow and uncertain. But when she stepped into the training fields that day and saw Kaelen waiting for her, everything else, her wolf, the whisper, the strangeness glowing faintly beneath her skin, fell away. Kaelen's golden eyes found her instantly, and the world tilted. He strode toward her, commanding as always, but softer with her. His presence was a shield. The other Omegas quieted when he drew near, their laughter dying before it could spark. For a brief moment, Ilara felt as though she belonged, because he made it so. "You weren't at dinner last night," Kaelen murmured, his voice pitched only for her. "I wasn't hungry." It wasn't the truth, but what could she say? "I spent the night clutching a glowing mark and listening to a forest call my name." He studied her a long moment, like he could see past the flimsy mask. His hand lifted, brushing her elbow as though steadying her. That small touch seared her skin, spreading warmth into her bones. "Come with me," he said simply. And she did. They walked beyond the edge of the fields, into the thinning woods where moonlight spilled like liquid silver through the branches. The night air was cool, and the silence between them carried its own weight. Finally, Kaelen stopped. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. "Ilara," he said, her name raw on his tongue. "Do you ever wonder if fate made a mistake?" Her heart clenched. The words she had always feared. "Every day." He turned sharply, eyes burning. "No, not with you." She blinked, stunned. "You are mine," he continued, stepping closer, every word dripping with fire. "I don't care if you have no wolf. I don't care what the pack whispers. They will all learn. Kaelen's mate is not to be touched, not to be mocked. You are mine." The conviction in his voice struck deep. He believed it, at least in that moment. And for the first time in her life, Ilara felt chosen. Her chest tightened, her throat burning with unshed tears. No one had ever said those words to her. No one had ever claimed her as if she mattered. Kaelen reached out, catching her hand. Their fingers tangled, strong and sure, fitting together like the missing halves of something she had long forgotten. "Say you'll be mine," he whispered. Her breath caught. The world seemed to narrow until there was nothing but his voice, his hand, his heat bleeding into her. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to sink into him and forget everything else. The whispers, the cruelty, the emptiness inside her where a wolf should live. Her lips parted. The word trembled there, so close, aching to spill free. But instead she only whispered, "Kaelen." The way she said his name, it was enough. His body leaned forward, his forehead brushing hers, his nose grazing her cheek. The air between them thickened, charged with something electric, His breath warmed her lips, and she swore if she leaned forward just a fraction more, their mouths would meet. Her pulse hammered, her entire being alive with the almost touch, the almost kiss. But he didn't move closer. He held himself still, trembling with restraint. And that restraint said more than any kiss could. He wanted her. He was holding back for her. She closed her eyes, tears slipping free, not from sorrow but from the overwhelming rush of finally being seen, finally being wanted. That night, when Alara lay down in her small bed, she smiled for the first time in a long time. Against all odds, despite every cruel whisper, she had been chosen. She belonged. She loved him. But the dream began to fracture sooner than she realized. Kaelen grew distant as the night deepened, as though some shadow had taken root inside him. He smiled when he saw her, but the warmth didn't reach his eyes. He touched her hand, but his fingers twitched away too soon. Alara noticed. Of course she did, and she noticed something else. The way his gaze strayed when he thought she wasn't looking. The way his body stiffened when her sister entered a room. At first she dismissed it. Paranoia, a trick of her bruised mind. Kaelen was hers. He had vowed it beneath the moonlight. He had sworn it with trembling breath against her lips. But fate is cruel, and truth is crueler. That evening, searching for Kaelen, she followed the sound of voices into the shadowed corridor of the Alpha's house. She rounded a corner and froze. Her world shattered. Kaelen's hands were pressed against the wall, his body caging another's. Her sister. His face was inches from hers, his eyes wild, lips hovering so dangerously close that Alara could not deny what she saw. Her breath tore from her chest, jagged and broken. The mark on her wrist pulsed violently, searing hot as though mocking her foolish heart. Her mate, her Kaelen, her love, pressed against her sister, ready to kiss her. Ilara's cry caught in her throat, strangled by betrayal. The boy who had promised her everything was about to rip her heart to pieces. The corridor was dimly lit, shadows spilling across the stone walls like veins of darkness. Alara froze at the sight before her, her breath caught sharp in her throat. For a split second she thought she must have imagined it, that her mind was weaving cruel illusions to torment her. But it wasn't an illusion. Kaelen's mouth was pressed fiercely against her sister's, his hands tangled in her hair, as though he couldn't bear to let her go. His body pinned her against the wall, their lips moving with desperate hunger, the kind of kiss Alara had never known, never been given. It wasn't tender, it wasn't restrained, it was wild. The kiss was fevered, urgent, lips crashing and parting, teeth grazing, tongues tangling in a rhythm that spoke of longing already shared in secret. Her sister arched into him, her arms looped around his shoulders, as though she had always belonged there. Kaelen groaned into the kiss, deep and guttural, like he was drowning and her sister was the only air he could breathe. Ilara's body went cold. Her heart slammed once against her ribs, then seemed to fracture, cracking wide open as though a hand had ripped into her chest. Her sister, her mate, the boy who had promised her the moonlight, the boy who had whispered that she didn't need a wolf, that she was already his heart, devouring her sister's lips like she was the one meant for him all along. The mark on Alara's wrist burned, searing through her skin, mocking her. Her fingers trembled at her side, her body screaming at her to look away, to turn back, to unsee what her heart could not bear. But her feet wouldn't move. She stood rooted, forced to watch as Kaelen's hands slid down her sister's back, gripping her waist, lifting her easily off the ground. Her sister's legs wrapped around him, her laughter muffled against his mouth before it dissolved back into the wet sound of their kiss. His hips pressed against hers, his movements urgent, starving, as though he'd been waiting all his life for this moment. Not the vows he'd whispered to Alara. Alara's throat clenched, but no sound came out. She was nothing. She had always been nothing. The walls seemed to close in, her chest tight with the raw sting of betrayal. She thought she might vomit, the bile clawing its way up her throat, Her heart screamed at her to fight, to tear them apart, to demand an explanation that would make sense of the madness unfolding in front of her. But her soul, the broken, wolfless soul that had always lived on scraps of hope, already knew the truth. There was no explanation. There was no mistake. Kaelen had chosen, and it wasn't her. The sound of their kiss still echoed in her ears as Alara stumbled back, her body numb. She didn't even remember turning, didn't remember how her legs began to move, only that suddenly she was running. Her vision blurred with tears. The hall blurred, the torches flickering like stars smeared across her sight. Her lungs burned, every gasp of air slicing through her chest as if the forest itself was tearing into her. She didn't stop to think where she was going, didn't stop to think at all. Her world was gone. The mate bond that had promised her belonging was ashes, and her heart, what little was left of it, was nothing but shards cutting into her from the inside. She burst through the back doors of the Alpha's house, the night air slamming into her skin like 1,000 knives. The moon glared overhead, full and merciless, silver light pouring over her as though to remind her she was utterly alone beneath its gaze. Her feet carried her into the forest, branches whipping her arms, roots clawing at her ankles. The glowing mark on her wrist pulsed harder with every step, hot and relentless, as though mocking her grief, branding her with the reminder of the mate who had chosen another. "Alara!" her mind screamed. Not his voice this time, her own voice fractured, lost. The forest swallowed her whole. Somewhere between sobs, she stumbled. Her knees hit damp soil, the moss swallowing her cry. She pressed her palm against her chest, desperate to hold herself together, but the pain wouldn't be contained. She had thought heartbreak was just a word, a poetic cruelty tossed around in whispered tales of rejection. But this was different. This was annihilation. Her ribs ached like they were cracking apart to make room for her grief, her heart pounding so violently she thought it might burst from the strain. She tilted her head back, gasping at the stars above. "Why?" she whispered, voice torn and raw. "Why wasn't I enough?" The silence of the forest answered her. But then, another sound, a low rustle, deliberate. Not the wind, not the usual skitter of small forest creatures. Alara's body stiffened. She dragged her sleeve across her tear-streaked face, her vision narrowing, trying to pierce the dark. Someone was there. She could feel it, the weight of a gaze pressing against her, heavy and consuming. Her heart stumbled. She rose shakily, her breath shallow, scanning the trees. "Who's there?" she croaked. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive. Then, movement. A shadow detached itself from the trees, tall and cloaked, its figure almost blending into the night itself. Her chest tightened with fear. But something else stirred beneath the fear, something magnetic, drawn. The figure did not rush her. He did not threaten. He only stood, cloaked in shadow, watching her with an intensity that burned hotter than Kaelen's kiss had ever made her feel. The air shifted as he stepped closer, silent, purposeful. Alara's knees weakened. She should run. She should scream. But her body betrayed her, rooted in place by something primal, something unexplainable. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low rumble, deep and resonant, curling through the trees like smoke. "He was never meant for you, little wolfless one." The words pierced her. The stranger knew her. And though his presence should have terrified her, Alara's shattered heart trembled with something she couldn't name. The forest was silent after he vanished, leaving Alara shaken to her core. His words lingered, burrowed into her soul like a seed too dangerous to water. "He was never meant for you, little wolfless one." She stumbled home at dawn, her body aching from exhaustion, her face streaked with the salt of dried tears. But even as she crossed the pack's borders, she knew nothing would ever be the same. By midday, the whispers had already begun. The story of Kaelen and her sister had spread like wildfire, tongues wagging, eyes gleaming with cruel delight. Ilara had thought the pack's mockery for being wolfless was unbearable. But this was worse. Poor little Ilara, one of the Omegas sneered as she passed. She couldn't keep her mate, not even with his pity. Unworthy, another hissed. Why would the Alpha's heir choose a weakling without a wolf when her sister is right there, ripe and glowing with power? Laughter followed her like smoke, choking her, filling her lungs until she could hardly breathe. She kept her head high, even as her insides twisted into knots, but the feast that night would carve her open completely. The great hall was ablaze with torches, long tables heavy with roasted meats, golden bread and honeyed wine. The entire pack gathered, voices rising in laughter and chatter, the scent of spiced meat and burning pine thick in the air. Ilara walked in slowly, her simple gown clinging to her frame, her glowing wrist mark hidden beneath her sleeve. Every step felt like walking into the jaws of wolves. She searched for Kaelen instinctively, and she found him. Sitting at the head table, her sister perched beside him as though she were already queen. His arm rested casually along the back of her sister's chair, his smile carved sharp for her, not Ilara. Ilara's stomach knotted. The pack didn't even bother to hide their stares. "Look at them," a woman whispered loudly. "Fate always fixes its mistakes." Ilara clenched her fists. She sat alone at the far edge of the table, back straight, spine rigid. She would not cry here. She would not give them the satisfaction. But the cruelty was relentless. Halfway through the feast, a servant passed carrying a jug of wine. He stumbled deliberately, and the rich crimson liquid cascaded down her gown, soaking her bodice, staining her pale skin like blood. The hall erupted in laughter. "Oh, forgive me, Lady Wolfless," the servant mocked, his grin sharp as the blade of a knife. "Wine seems to have found you more appetizing than any mate could." Ilara's face burned hot. She rose sharply, her gown dripping, clinging to her curves, every eye in the hall fixed on her humiliation. She could feel their hunger for her downfall, their delight in her suffering. Kaelen's gaze finally met hers. For a heartbeat, she prayed, "Defend me, stand for me, love me still." But his golden eyes were cold. "Perhaps fate made a mistake," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, cutting sharper than any blade. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the stone walls, wrapping around her like a noose. Ilara couldn't breathe. Her body shook, but she forced her chin high, forcing the tears back even as her heart cracked anew. She turned and fled, the laughter chasing her down the hall, down the steps, into the cool night air. The world spun. Her chest burned. Her gown clung to her, heavy and wet, as if even the wine wanted to drown her. She leaned against the cold stone wall outside, gasping for air, pressing a trembling hand over her mouth to keep the sobs from spilling free. Her fingers brushed against something. She looked down. A folded piece of parchment had been slipped into her palm, though she hadn't felt it placed there. The parchment was thick, expensive, its surface smooth as silk. Her heart stuttered as she unfolded it. The words inside were written in a bold, sharp hand. "Meet me beneath the silver moon. I can give you everything he denied you, if you dare." Her hands shook. The note seemed to vibrate with its own pulse, thrumming in the same rhythm as the mark on her wrist. At the bottom of the parchment, inked in midnight black, was a sigil. It shimmered faintly, glowing as though alive. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the same glow as her mark. Ilara stared at it, her heart racing, her mind unraveling. Who was he? The stranger cloaked in shadow, the one who whispered from the darkness. How had he known her pain, her soul, her mark? And why, despite everything she'd lost, did her body hum with the dangerous promise of his words? She clutched the note to her chest, trembling. For the first time in her life, something in her blood stirred. Not her wolf, but something older, deeper, darker. The silver moon rose higher in the sky, casting its glow across her trembling form, as though watching, waiting. The moon was swollen and silver, heavy with an unspoken promise, when Ilara found herself standing at the edge of the forest again. The note burned in her palm, its sigil pulsing faintly as though alive, guiding her deeper and deeper beneath the canopy of trees. Her heart raced with every step. Fear pressed against her ribs, sharp and insistent, but beneath it simmered something else, something reckless. A hunger that curled low in her stomach, whispering that this moment could be her undoing, or her rebirth. She told herself she came because she was desperate, because Kaelen had humiliated her, because her sister's laughter still rang in her ears. But the truth was harder. The truth was that the stranger's voice had already coiled itself around her soul back in the darkness of the forest, and she could not forget it. He was never meant for you, little wolfless one. The way he had said it, like he knew her, like he had always known her. Now she would know him. The clearing opened before her, bathed in silver light. And there he was, the hooded stranger. He stood tall and motionless, his form shrouded in dark robes that seemed to drink in the moonlight. Even in stillness, he exuded a presence so potent it prickled against her skin, raising the tiny hairs along her arms. His aura was vast, coiled, predatory, like the forest itself bowed to him. "Ilara," he said, her name falling from his lips like a command. His voice was deep, resonant, and threaded with something ancient. Her breath hitched. "Who are you?" He stepped closer, the moonlight catching against the edge of his hood. She still could not see his face, only the strength in his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, the weight of him pressing against her air. "Names are fragile things," he said softly, though there was no softness in the power curling around him. "What matters is what I offer you." Her pulse skittered. "And what is that?" His hand rose, not to touch her, but to let the moonlight catch against the sigil glowing faintly in his palm. It was the same shape as the one on the parchment, the same as the mark seared into her wrist. "Marriage," he said. The word struck her chest like a blow. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Marriage to me?" The stranger continued, his voice dropping lower, darker. "I will shield you. I will elevate you. I will destroy those who dared to humiliate you. No alpha will mock you again. No sister will steal from you again. No mate will ever betray you again." Her throat tightened, the words slicing through her defenses. She laughed sharp and broken. "Marriage? To a man I don't even know?" "You already know me," he said, stepping so close she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "You know me in your blood, in the way your mark burns for mine. You felt it, didn't you? The first time I called your name in the dark?" Her wrist pulsed violently, answering his words. Ilara's legs trembled. His presence was suffocating, intoxicating. Every instinct screamed danger, but her body leaned toward him anyway, caught in his gravity. His scent reached her then, dark, primal, threaded with the wild tang of pine and smoke and something richer, more dangerous. Her voice faltered. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her heart, her shattered, humiliated heart, ached to grasp the hand he extended. She thought of Kaelen, his lips devouring her sister's, his cold voice cutting her down before the pack. Perhaps fate made a mistake. Her vision blurred with hot tears, but her chin lifted in defiance. "Fine," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll do it. I'll marry you. If only to spite them." The stranger's mouth curved, a shadow of a smile visible beneath the hood. "Then let it be done." The forest shifted. From the shadows stepped figures cloaked in black, their faces hidden, their movements silent. They carried torches of silver flame, the light unnatural, unearthly. The air grew heavy, thick with power that thrummed against Ilara's skin. A circle was formed around them, torches casting long shadows that bent like specters, The stranger reached for her hand. His grip was iron, his touch scorching, his aura wrapping around her like chains she could not escape, and did not want to. "Repeat after me," he commanded. Ilara's lips parted. She didn't know the words, but they came anyway. Ancient vows spilling into the night like they had always been carved into her tongue. Her voice trembled, but each word sealed tighter around her heart, binding, branding. The stranger spoke too, his voice deep and unshakable, each syllable vibrating through her bones. When he said her name, it was like her soul bent toward him, like the mark on her wrist was a lock and his words the key. She should have been terrified. She should have run. Instead, she let the words sink into her flesh. When the final vow was spoken, the circle of torches flared high, silver flames licking the sky. The cloaked figures bowed their heads in unison, as though acknowledging a union older than the pack, older than fate itself. Ilara's chest heaved, her skin tingling, her mark burning like fire. The stranger turned to her. His hands rose, pulling back the hood. Her breath caught. His face emerged from the shadows, sharp, flawless, impossibly striking. But it was his eyes that stole her breath completely. They burned with silver fire, alive and otherworldly, glowing with a power no alpha had ever wielded. He was not just a man, not just a wolf. He was something more. He leaned down, his lips brushing against the shell of her ear, his voice rumbling low, dangerous, and possessive. "You are now bound," he whispered, "to the Lycan King." Ilara's knees buckled. Her heart pounded. And deep in her chest, something awakened. Untamed hearts. Tell me this. What is the difference between surrender and being devoured? Ilara could not tell. Not as the hooded stranger guided her deeper into the forest, into a place she had never dared step. The trees loomed impossibly tall, branches curling like claws around the moon. Shadows shifted at the edges of her vision, alive, watching, hungering. And then, there it was, a circle carved into the earth, etched with glowing runes that pulsed in rhythm with her mark. It was no ordinary clearing. It was a sanctum, a place that felt older than the pack itself. The air was thick with power, wild and unbroken. The stranger's presence only deepened it, until the very ground seemed to bow beneath his steps. What is this place?" Ilara whispered, her voice trembling, her heart racing. His hood tilted toward her, voice low, steady, edged with command. "The circle where kings are crowned, and tonight, where my queen shall rise." Her breath hitched. Queen. The word seared through her, sharp and impossible. She was wolfless, an outcast, a joke in her pack's eyes. How could she be anything more? Yet when his hand brushed hers, her skin burned as though she had been lit from within. The ritual began. He stepped into the circle first, raising his hands to the moon. The runes blazed brighter, threads of silver fire curling up his arms. His voice thundered as he spoke words not meant for mortal lips. The ground trembled. The air hummed. And when he turned to her, extending his hand, she could not move. "Ilara, step forward." Her pulse hammered in her ears. She wanted to run, she wanted to scream. She wanted God's helper to obey. Her legs carried her, trembling but unbroken, into the circle. The runes flared, the mark on her wrist burned. She gasped as heat surged through her body, coiling low in her belly, making her knees weaken. He pulled back his hood. For the first time, she saw his face clearly. Hair black as midnight, jaw carved in ruthless lines, lips firm, eyes molten silver that seemed to pierce straight into her soul. He was devastating, terrifying, beautiful in a way that made the word man feel inadequate. And his gaze, hungry, knowing, possessive, set fire to every part of her. The vows came, not from a priest, but from him. His words wove around her like chains, every syllable binding tighter than the last. "Do you swear?" His voice rumbled, deep and resonant. "To walk beside me through shadow and moonlight, to stand unbroken where others fall?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to say no, to fight, to spit in his face, but her lips parted and her voice betrayed her. "I swear." The ground shuddered. A wind whipped through the clearing, tossing her hair into her eyes. Her mark blazed white-hot, wrapping light up her arm like a brand. He stepped closer, towering over her. His hand pressed to her heart. His power pressed harder. "And do you accept me, body and soul, as yours? Forever bound? Forever claimed?" Her knees trembled. Her chest rose and fell in frantic rhythm. Her heart screamed one name: Kaelen, the boy who had loved her, the mate who had kissed her sister. But Kaelen had broken her, and this stranger, this impossible king, was offering her something she had never been given before: power, respect, fearless protection. "I accept." The forest roared. The runes flamed to life, blinding silver. Her mark flared in unison with his eyes, and then silence. The vow was sealed. Her breath came in shallow gasps as his hand slid from her chest, down the curve of her waist, lingering with possession. Every nerve screamed where he touched her, fire licking through her skin. The ritual was done, but he was not finished. He leaned in, close enough that his breath feathered against her lips, close enough that her body arched toward him despite her mind screaming to resist. His voice was rough, edged with hunger and command. A queen must be claimed. Her lips parted, her heart thundered. The air between them burned with a tension so thick she thought she would break from it. Before she could move, he swept her into his arms. His strength was absolute, inescapable, as though she weighed nothing. The clearing faded, replaced by the darkened hall of stone he carried her into. A bedchamber unlike any she had ever seen. Drapes of black silk, the scent of fire and musk, shadows curling like living things along the walls. He set her down, caging her in with his body as he pressed her against the heavy wooden door. Her breath caught, her pulse skittered, pulse. She could not escape his gaze, molten silver burning into hers, stripping her bare. "You belong to me now, Ilara," he growled, voice low, dark, final. And with the weight of those words, she realized her life as she knew it had ended. And something far more dangerous had just begun. The world was still trembling around Ilara when the weight of his words sank into her bones. "You belong to me now, Ilara." They echoed in her chest, heavy, unavoidable, burning. His body pressed her against the carved wooden door of his chamber, the warmth of his breath ghosting over her lips. His hands braced at either side of her head, caging her in. She could feel the sheer command in his stance, his presence pressing into her like a storm she could not outrun. But it wasn't only fear that flooded her veins. No, there was something far more dangerous threading through her blood, something that curled hot and molten in the pit of her stomach. Fascination, desire, the sharp, irresistible pull of something primal. His eyes, those impossible molten silver eyes, pinned her in place. "I told you once," he said, voice low, velvet over steel. "A queen must be claimed, but you don't yet understand who has claimed you." Ilara's throat tightened. Who are you?" The faintest smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. He leaned closer, so close she could count the flecks of fire in his irises, so close her breath tangled with his. "I am not just an alpha." His tone rumbled with ancient weight, each word a drumbeat in the silence. "I am the king, the Lycan King, the blood that all packs bow to, the law above every alpha's law." Her world shattered. The stories she had grown up hearing rushed through her mind in jagged fragments. The Lycan King, the untouchable ruler who lived beyond the reach of mortals, whispered to be more beast than man, more god than king, a phantom, a legend. And now, her husband. Her lips parted, her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow bursts. "You," she stammered, struggling for air. "You tricked me. You trapped me into this." The smirk faded. His jaw tightened. The intensity in his eyes sharpened to a dangerous gleam. "I saved you, little wolfless one," he growled, the title no longer mockery but dark endearment. "From their cruelty. From the betrayal of the mate who cast you aside for your own blood. From a fate of crawling at the feet of those who never deserved you." Her chest ached. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "You had no right." His hand moved, sudden and fierce, capturing her chin between his fingers, tilting her face up to his. The touch was firm, commanding, yet not cruel. She gasped, caught in the vice of his gaze. "No right?" His voice dropped lower, a dangerous whisper. "I have every right, because you were always mine. Long before Kaelen kissed another. Long before you wept for scraps of love that were never worthy of you. I watched. I waited. And now..." He pressed closer, his body brushing hers, heat radiating through every inch of contact. Her heart stuttered. "Now, you are where you were always meant to be." Ilara's lips trembled. Her pulse raced wildly against her skin. She should have shoved him away, should have spat in his face. Instead, her hands, traitorous, trembling, lifted and pressed against his chest. She felt it then, the raw, unyielding strength of him, the steady hammer of his heart beneath layers of muscle and command. He was flesh, blood, heat, undeniably real. Her breath hitched when his thumb brushed her lower lip. "Ilara." His voice was no longer a growl, but something rougher, something softer, something that wrapped around her like a vow. "You belong to me, and I..." Her thoughts fractured when his mouth finally claimed hers. The kiss was not gentle. It was fire. It was hunger. It was everything she had buried, everything she had been denied. His lips crushed against hers, parting them, demanding entrance. And God's help her, she gave it. The taste of him flooded her senses, wild, intoxicating, sharp like winter air and deep like the earth beneath her feet. His hand slid to the back of her neck, anchoring her, holding her as if he would never let her go. The other pressed to her waist, fingers digging into the fabric of her gown, pulling her against him until there was no space left to breathe. She melted. Against every shred of reason, every scream of protest in her mind, her body betrayed her. Her lips moved with his, answering, desperate, needy. A moan broke in her throat, swallowed by the ferocity of his kiss. It deepened, slow and relentless, like he was consuming her. His tongue swept against hers, coaxing, commanding, claiming. She clutched at his tunic, nails biting into the thick fabric, terrified she would fall if she let go. The world narrowed to nothing but this kiss, this heat, this impossible man who was now her husband. When he finally pulled back, her chest heaved, lips swollen, breaths coming ragged and uneven. His eyes burned down at her, silver alight with something primal and unrestrained. "You feel it," he murmured, forehead pressing against hers. "Don't deny it, you are mine, Ilara, and no one will ever take you from me." Tears burned behind her eyes. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong, that she would never be anyone's possession. But the ache in her chest, the fire in her veins betrayed her silence. Before she could summon words, the heavy doors to the chamber creaked open. Both their heads snapped toward the sound. A figure stumbled inside, cloaked, bent low, breath ragged. A spy, eyes wide, fear dripping from every movement. He dropped to his knees before the Lycan King, but his gaze darted nervously toward Ilara. "My king," he rasped, clutching his side, blood staining his tunic. "Forgive the intrusion, but you must know, there is an assassin within the palace walls." Ilara's breath caught. The spy's eyes, dark and haunted, lifted and locked on her. "And the assassin seeks her." The spy's words hung in the chamber like a blade suspended above them. An assassin. For her. Ilara's blood ran cold. She pressed back against the door, eyes wide, lips still tingling from the Lycan King's kiss. Her heart was pounding from a different rhythm now. Fear. tangled with confusion. Tangled with the wildfire still burning in her chest from his touch. The king's face darkened, fury hardening the sharp lines of his jaw. He released her with deliberate slowness, as though prying himself away from her was a punishment to the world itself. His gaze snapped to the kneeling spy, voice low, thunderous. "Where?" The spy coughed, trembling. "Inside the palace, moving through the west wing. We caught his scent, but he cloaks it with wolfsbane and blood." His eyes shifted to Alara again, haunted, almost pitying. "He is here for her." The king's aura exploded, a crushing wave of power that pressed against her skin like a physical force. Shadows thickened, curling through the corners of the room. His voice came sharp as a blade. "Double the guards. Lock the gates. No one leaves this palace alive without my command." The spy stumbled to his feet, bowing low before vanishing into the hall. The heavy doors slammed shut. Silence swallowed them whole. Ilara's pulse refused to calm. She turned toward him, anger sparking through the haze of fear. "Why me? Why would anyone want me dead?" He turned to her then, and the look in his eyes burned hotter than fire. He strode forward, his presence swallowing the distance between them until she was trapped once more beneath his shadow. "Because," he said, voice thick with fury and something darker, "you are mine. And the fastest way to wound a king is to strike at his queen." Her lips parted, chest heaving. The word queen struck like a hammer. Before she could answer, his hand slid around her waist. His strength was iron, pulling her flush against him as though the walls themselves could not hold her safer than his arms. "You will not leave my sight tonight," he growled, possessive, raw. "You will not sleep alone. Not when death walks these halls." The meaning in his words sank deep. The bedchamber behind him loomed, heavy curtains casting shadows across the vast expanse of silk and firelight. The very air thickened with heat, heavy and undeniable. Ilara's breath quickened. "You can't just—" "I can," he interrupted, his voice a dangerous whisper, "and I will." His hand trailed upward, the warmth of his palm burning through the thin fabric of her gown. Every brush of his fingers sent sparks racing down her spine. She stiffened, torn between fury and a hunger she could no longer deny. Her fists pressed against his chest. "This is madness. I don't want—" But her words broke, crumbling under the truth. She did want. She hated herself for it, but her body betrayed her with every shiver, every tremble, every helpless quickening of her breath. He leaned down, silver eyes never leaving hers, voice low, raw, with a promise she didn't understand. "Your body may tremble, your lips may deny, but your heart—" His thumb brushed over the mark on her wrist, igniting it with a pulse of heat. "Your heart has already chosen." Her knees weakened. She tried to look away, but his hand cupped her jaw, turning her face back toward his. The intensity in his eyes unraveled her resolve thread by thread, until there was nothing left but heat, aching and insistent. And then he kissed her. It was not wild and consuming like before. No, this kiss was softer, slower, but no less devastating. His lips pressed to hers with reverence that made her chest ache. It was deep, lingering, as though he was memorizing the shape of her mouth, the taste of her surrender. Her hands, once braced to push him away, curled into the fabric of his tunic, holding him as though she could not bear the thought of release. She yielded against him, her lips moving with his, drawn deeper and deeper into the kiss until she thought she might dissolve inside it. He pulled her closer, his body solid and unyielding, yet his touch gentled at her back, steadying her as if he feared she might break. The kiss stretched into eternity, each breath stolen, each moment tighter until she was trembling in his arms. When he finally drew back, she was gasping, lips swollen, her forehead pressed to his. His thumb lingered along her cheek, softer now, almost tender. "Ilara," he whispered, and for a fleeting instant, he sounded less like a king, less like a predator, and more like a man confessing something he could not admit in the light. "You are mine, and I will kill any who dare reach for you." Her heart ached. For Kaelen, for what she had lost, for herself, for what she had become. For him, this impossible, dangerous king who held her as though she were both treasure and weapon. Her lips parted, words trembling at the edge. But she never spoke them, because in that instant, the heavy curtains that shrouded the bed stirred, not with the breath of the wind, but with the deliberate ripple of a hand pushing them aside. Ilara froze, and from the shadows, a figure emerged, cloaked in black, a silver dagger glinting in his grip. The blade caught the firelight, gleaming with deadly promise, its edge aimed straight for her heart. The dagger flashed. Ilara's breath caught, her body frozen against the king's chest. The assassin's blade glinted brighter with every step forward, its tip hungering for her. She would have screamed, but before sound could leave her throat, the Lycan King moved. It was not a motion. It was a storm. His hand shot out, catching the attacker's wrist mid-strike. Bones cracked with a sickening snap. The assassin gasped, tried to twist free, but the king's grip was merciless. With a snarl, he wrenched the dagger away, the silver weapon falling harmlessly to the floor. In the same breath, the king slammed the intruder against the stone wall. His power radiated through the chamber, a wave of fury so thick Ilara felt it against her skin. Shadows surged like living things at the edges of the room, feeding on his wrath. "Who sent you?" His voice was a growl, low and venomous. The assassin spat blood, lips curling. "She doesn't belong to you. She never will." Ilara flinched. The king's jaw clenched, silver eyes blazing brighter than fire. In one brutal motion, he drove his hand into the man's chest, not to kill, but to hold him pinned with unyielding strength. The wall cracked beneath the force. "You will speak," he growled, fangs flashing, "or you will wish for death before I grant it." But the assassin only smiled, broken teeth glistening red. And then, before the king could stop him, he bit down on something hidden in his mouth. A glass capsule shattered. Poison foamed over his lips. His body went rigid, convulsing, then fell limp. The stench of burnt flesh filled the chamber. Ilara gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Her knees threatened to buckle. The king dropped the corpse without ceremony, his chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. He turned, his fury still burning, and when his gaze fell on her, it softened, but only slightly. He stalked toward her, every step lethal and unstoppable, until he stood so close the air between them tightened with heat. His hands cupped her face, rough but steady, anchoring her trembling form. His silver eyes searched hers, sharp and unrelenting. "Do you see now?" he demanded, voice raw. "Enemies circle us. You are the blade they seek to plunge into me, and I will not allow it." Her lips trembled. "But, no." His tone cut her protest to ribbons. "From this night forward, you do not leave my side. You do not walk these halls alone. You do not trust anyone but me. Do you understand?" Her chest heaved, her pride flared. Every word he spoke was a command, a cage, another layer of chains to bind her. And yet, some dark, twisted part of her shuddered at the intensity of his possessiveness. His fury was terrifying, but it was also proof that he would burn the world to keep her safe. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to resist. Instead, she whispered, almost against her will, "I understand." He drew a long breath, his thumb brushing along her cheek. The gesture was startlingly gentle, a crack in the armor of his dominance. "There is more," he murmured, softer now. "You ache for your wolf. You think yourself broken without it, but you are not. Your wolf sleeps." Her eyes widened. "What?" He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear, his words sinking into her bones like a spell. "I can awaken it. I alone can rouse the beast within you. I can make you whole. But the ritual..." His lips ghosted against her skin, not quite a kiss, making her body tremble. "The ritual requires surrender. To me. Fully. body, heart, and soul. Her heart pounded. Fear and desire tangled in a knot so tight she could barely breathe. Why? Her voice was a ragged whisper. His lips curved into a shadow of a smile. Because your wolf knows me, as you do, and to awaken it, you must let me in. Her lips parted, words dying in her throat. The king's hand slid to the back of her neck, tilting her head just so. His gaze fell to her lips, and for a moment the world stopped. She felt it building, the magnetic pull, the inevitability. And then his mouth was on hers. This kiss was not fire like before, not soft reverence like the last. It was both. A devastating union of hunger and tenderness. His lips claimed hers deeply, insistently, until she gasped against him, yielding despite the war raging inside her. His tongue swept over hers, coaxing, teasing, commanding, yet his hands cradled her face as if she were fragile crystal. The contradiction undid her. She pressed into him, clutching at his chest, trembling as heat pooled low and sharp in her belly. The kiss deepened. Long, endless, every breath stolen, every thought consumed. When at last he drew back, her lips were swollen, her body trembling, her soul in chaos. He held her close against his chest, his words of vow whispered into her hair. I will awaken you, Ilara. I will give you the power they denied, and I will love you until you forget every wound carved into your heart. Her breath shuddered. The world felt unreal, the walls of his chamber closing in, her fate binding tighter around her. Exhaustion weighed heavy. At last, he guided her to the bed, his arms still locked protectively around her. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of his heart steady her. For the first time, she almost believed she might be safe. But safety was an illusion. When dawn's pale light began to creep through the window, Ilara stirred. Her hand brushed against her pillow and froze. There, resting where her head had lain, was a folded letter. Its edges were sealed in wax, darkened by blood. Her name was scrawled across the surface in an unfamiliar hand. Her heart pounded as she broke the seal. The words inside stole her breath. Your wolf is not his to awaken. Meet me, and I will tell you why. The blood-sealed letter pulsed in Ilara's trembling hand, its words echoing inside her skull like a curse. Your wolf is not his to awaken. Meet me, and I will tell you why. The king had left her chamber just before dawn, summoned to a council of war after the night's attack. His absence filled the room with silence that seemed to press against her ears. Shadows lingered in the corners, whispering doubts. Who had slipped the letter beneath her head as she slept in the king's arms? And what did they mean? Not his to awaken? Her thoughts twisted restlessly, chasing each other in circles until she could no longer sit still. She rose, pulling her cloak tight, and slipped into the hall. The palace was stirring, guards pacing in silver armor, maids rushing with trays and linens. Yet somehow the corridors felt deserted, emptied of air, every step hers alone. She should have turned back. Every warning the king gave her screamed at the back of her mind. Do not trust anyone but me. And yet, the letter burned in her pocket. When she turned the corner into one of the palace's quieter gardens, she froze. A man waited there. Cloaked, hood drawn low, his presence was a wound in the calm morning air. He turned when he heard her steps, and the breath left her lungs in a sharp, aching rush. Kaelen. The name rose unbidden, tearing from her soul before her lips could form it. Her sister's mate, her betrayer, the alpha who had marked her first, only to shatter her heart with ruthless cruelty. And yet, her bond with him had not been erased. The sight of him ripped through her body like fire through dry grass. His scent, faint even beneath the disguise, hit her like a blade of memory, and her wolf, still sleeping, still buried, stirred uneasily inside her chest. Ilara. His voice cracked. Just her name, spoken like a prayer and a wound all at once. She should have run. She should have screamed for guards. She should have turned her back on him, the man who had abandoned her to ruin. But her feet would not move. He closed the space between them in quick strides, stopping only when he was so near she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His hood fell back, revealing a face sharper, more haunted than she remembered. His eyes, those familiar storm gray eyes, searched hers desperately. "I had to see you," he rasped. "I couldn't stay away." Her breath caught, fury and longing warring in her chest. "How dare you come here?" she hissed. "After everything, after what you did, I didn't do it." His words cut across hers, ragged and raw. "Ilara, you have to believe me. I was tricked, lied to. I never meant—" His voice broke and he swallowed hard, eyes glistening with a torment that looked too real. "I never meant to betray you." Her heart thundered, memories slashing through her like claws. The night she found him in her sister's arms, the hollow silence of his denial, the way her world had collapsed, leaving her broken and unwanted. And yet, here he was, trembling, begging, his voice trembling with a desperation that scraped her soul. "Don't lie to me," she whispered, though the strength bled from her words. "I swear it," he said, stepping closer still. His hand lifted, hovering inches from her cheek but not daring to touch. "I swear on the bond that still ties us. Ilara, they tricked me. They made me believe you had rejected me. By the time I realized the truth..." His breath shook. "It was too late, but my heart has never stopped beating for you." She wanted to hate him. Gods, she needed to hate him. But the raw pain in his voice cut past her walls, slicing into the place that still remembered every stolen kiss, every whispered promise. And when his eyes locked onto hers, the pull of their old bond roared to life. It was undeniable, brutal in its intensity. She felt it, like invisible chains binding their hearts, tugging her toward him against all reason. "Leave with me," Kaelen begged, his voice rough. "Tonight, before it's too late. He's caging you, Ilara, controlling you, you know it, you feel it. But I can free you, I can give you back everything you've lost." Her chest heaved, her hands trembling at her sides. She remembered the king's fierce vow, his silver eyes blazing as he swore to awaken her wolf. She remembered the kiss that had stolen her breath, the tenderness hidden beneath his dominance. She remembered how, for the first time, she had almost felt safe. And now here was Kaelen, begging for forgiveness, igniting every wound that had never healed. Her heart was a battlefield, torn between past and present, anger and longing, fury and desperate confusion. "Kaelen," her voice cracked. "I can't—" "Yes, you can." He seized her hand, pressing it to his chest over his pounding heart. The heat of him burned through her palm. "Feel this. Feel me. You're still mine. No king can take that away." Her breath shuddered. She wanted to pull back, she wanted to scream at him to stop. But her body betrayed her. Her fingers lingered against him, the bond surging like a storm between them. And then, pain. Sharp, searing, brutal. Her mark, the faded scar that bound her once to Kaelen, blazed like fire beneath her skin. She gasped, jerking as agony lanced up her arm. Kaelen's eyes widened. "Ilara." She tore her hand from his chest, staring in horror. Where her skin had touched him, the mark glowed faintly, the edges blistered and red as if fate itself scorched the bond. Her breath caught, her chest heaving. The truth slammed into her like a hammer. Someone was rejecting him. Not just her heart, not just her king, but destiny itself. The air between them crackled, sharp and cruel, as Kaelen reached for her again. No, this isn't right. You're mine, you're mine." But even as he said it, his skin burned where it had touched her, his hand shaking with pain. Ilara stumbled back, terror and revelation surging through her. Her wolf, silent all this time, stirred deep within her chest, and for the first time it whispered, "Not him." The palace had been transformed into a realm of shimmering decadence. Chandeliers burned with enchanted flames, scattering 1,000 reflections across gilded walls. The air was heavy with perfume, laughter, and the hushed whispers of ambition. Every noble wolf, every foreign envoy, every schemer hidden behind jeweled masks. And in the center of it all, Ilara stood, radiant in silk the color of midnight, a mask of silver lace pressed to her face. She had never felt so exposed. Every gaze was upon her, not because she was the wolfless Omega once scorned by her pack, but because she was now the queen of the Lycan King. The girl mocked and broken had become the most coveted woman in the realm. But she knew the truth. Those stares were not admiration. They were calculation, hunger, a measuring of her worth, of her weakness. Her pulse raced, her throat tightening. She would have faltered had he not been there. The king. He stood beside her, a towering presence cloaked in black and silver, his mask molded into the face of a beast, horns curling, fangs glinting. His aura was impossible to ignore, a dark fire that dared any to come too close. His hand rested possessively on the small of her back, searing through silk, anchoring her as if she might vanish the second he let go. And yet, his eyes never left her. Through the swirl of dancers, the clinking of goblets, the endless parade of wolves bowing and whispering her name, his gaze burned only for her. It should have comforted her. Instead, it lit her skin in ways she struggled to control. Every brush of his fingers along her spine, every lean of his body as he bent to murmur in her ear, it sent shivers through her that had nothing to do with fear. Ilara. His voice was low, roughened by something more dangerous than anger. Smile if you must, but do not mistake their intentions. They are vultures circling my treasure. She tilted her chin, a spark of defiance in her eyes. Perhaps your treasure should be allowed to breathe. His lips curved, not in amusement, but in something darker, sharper. Breathe, yes, but not stray. His fingers pressed against her waist, a subtle claim hidden in plain sight. You are mine, Ilara. No mask, no court, no suitor will change that. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to protest, to fight his suffocating control. And yet, when he pulled her onto the dance floor, her body betrayed her. The music swelled, violins and drums weaving a rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat. He led her into the steps with a mastery that brooked no refusal, every movement commanding, every turn designed to remind her who she danced with. But beneath that dominance was fire. His hand cradled hers, his other splayed firmly against the curve of her back. Their bodies brushed, their breaths mingled. Heat crackled between them, each step of the dance a battle between restraint and the dangerous temptation to let go. The room spun around them, but Ilara saw no one else. Only him. Only the searing silver of his eyes behind the mask, the storm of hunger and jealousy burning there. You tempt me, he growled under the music, pulling her closer until her chest pressed against his. Every breath, every glance. Even when you defy me, you tempt me. Her lips parted, but words abandoned her. His nearness consumed her, his voice wrapping around her like chains of fire. Then, as the dance slowed, a noble broke through the crowd. Tall, elegant, his mask carved of gold. He bowed low, offering a goblet to Ilara with a smile too polished to be sincere. A toast, he purred, to the king's radiant bride. May her reign be as eternal as the moon. Ilara hesitated. She could feel the king stiffen beside her, a growl rumbling faintly in his chest. But something in her, the need to prove she was not fragile, not merely a prize clutched in a beast's claws, flared. She took the cup. The noble's smirk deepened, and Ilara lifted it with steady hands, ignoring the king's searing glare. The liquid inside shimmered, crimson-edged with silver, smelling faintly of spice and wine. She brought it to her lips. The king's hand snapped to her wrist, halting her. His voice was a blade against her ear. Do not test me. Her eyes met his. She had been humiliated too many times, treated as weak, voiceless. Not tonight, not here. Defiantly, she pulled her wrist free and drank. The wine was cool at first, almost sweet. She swallowed, refusing to flinch under his burning stare. But then, her chest seized. The cup slipped from her hand, crashing to the floor, ruby liquid staining the marble. Her breath strangled in her throat, vision blurring as the sweetness turned to fire, to acid, scorching her veins. Ilara gasped, clutching at her chest. The music faltered, the crowd's laughter freezing into silence. And the king. His mask could not hide the fury that blazed across his face as he caught her collapsing form in his arms, silver eyes erupting with lethal fire. Ilara. His voice shook the hall, a snarl and a vow in one. What have they done to you? Her vision wavered. She tried to speak, to call his name, but her lips formed only a broken whisper. Then the poison struck deep, dragging her under. Darkness rushed in, swallowing everything. Ilara awoke to the sound of silence. Her eyelids fluttered open, heavy as stone, her body trembling with weakness. For a moment she thought she had slipped into death, until she felt warmth pressed against her, steady and unyielding. The king's arms. He sat by her bed, armored still, his mask abandoned, silver eyes fixed on her with a ferocity that made her breath catch. His hand was clamped around hers, thumb stroking her pulse, as if reassuring himself that she still lived. "You dare frighten me again," he murmured, voice low and dangerous, but frayed at the edges with fear. "And I will raise kingdoms to ash." Her lips parted, dry and trembling. The wine. Poison," he growled, the word thunder on his tongue. His other hand brushed a damp strand of hair from her brow, gentle in a way no one else would ever believe of him. "They tried to take you from me." Something deep in his tone made her chest ache. It was not just rage, it was desperation. Possessive, yes, but beneath it a trembling that only the heart could know. She wanted to answer, to tell him what burned in her chest, but the door creaked open. A council of nobles filed into the chamber, faces masked with polite disdain. Their eyes were sharp, unkind. The king stiffened, rising to his full height, but before he could unleash the fury radiating from him, the eldest noble bowed low. "With respect, Your Majesty," the man said smoothly. "This incident has cast a shadow. The people whisper that the queen is not strong enough to sit beside you, that she is still wolfless, still unworthy of the crown she wears." The king's snarl shook the walls, but the noble pressed on. "They demand proof." His gaze slid toward Ilara, piercing. "If she wishes to remain your queen, she must face the trials of the moon." Ilara's blood chilled. The trials. She had heard whispers of them. Ancient tests given only to those who sought the throne. Dangerous rituals designed to strip away weakness. Few survived. "No," the king barked. "She will not be subjected to your petty cruelties." But Ilara, still trembling from the poison, pushed herself upright. Her heart pounded, her body weak, but something inside her refused to bend. She had been mocked, scorned, betrayed. If she refused now, the court would never see her as anything more than a burden clinging to the king's side. "I will do it," she whispered. The king whirled toward her, fury blazing. "Ilara." Her hand found his, fingers curling with surprising strength. "If I don't, they'll never stop. Let me prove them wrong." For a moment silence stretched between them, filled only by the thrum of their bond. His silver eyes searched hers, torn between wrath and reluctant admiration. Finally, his jaw clenched. "Then I will stand at your side for every trial, and woe to the one who dares cheer your failure." The first trial began at dawn. The court gathered in the stone amphitheater, carved into the cliffside, the sea roaring below. Ilara stood barefoot on the cold ground, heart pounding, her mask gone. She faced the first test. Cunning, a maze of illusions conjured by the elders, filled with false paths, deceptive voices, and shadows meant to break her mind. She stepped forward, breath steady, and began. The whispers came quickly. You are nothing. You are wolfless. He will discard you as the Alpha did. Weak, worthless, broken. But each time doubt tried to claw at her, she thought of the king's hand on hers, of his vow to raise kingdoms should she fall. She thought of the mark on her wrist, glowing when she least expected, as if destiny itself pulsed through her veins. And slowly, one step at a time, she broke the maze. When she emerged, hours later, the crowd's silence was no longer scorn, but shock. Even the king's lips curved faintly as pride flared in his eyes. The second trial was loyalty. She was placed in a circle, ringed by warriors who shifted into wolves, fangs bared. She was told to kneel, to beg for mercy, to renounce her crown. If she did, she would walk away unharmed. But if she refused, the pack would descend. Her knees shook, her throat ached with the urge to cry out, but she lifted her chin, her voice clear. I am queen, she said, and I kneel for no one but the king who claimed me. The wolves lunged. The king's roar shattered the arena, his own form half shifting in rage. But at the last moment, the circle of warriors stopped, their snarls silenced. It had been a test, and she had passed. Days bled together, trials of resilience, of wit, of endurance. Each one left her bruised, battered, stripped to the bone. But with each victory, the whispers in the court shifted, from mockery to grudging respect to envy sharp enough to cut. And always, he was there, the king, watching, guarding, his presence a storm around her. His eyes devoured her when she faltered, his hand steadying her when she stumbled. At night, when her body trembled from exhaustion, he held her against his chest, whispering low promises against her skin. You will not break, he vowed. You were made for more than their scorn. You were made for me. Each night, their restraint frayed further, lips brushing, breath mingling, a kiss nearly claimed but never surrendered. The ache of it burned hotter than any trial. At last, the final trial came. The amphitheater was packed, every noble, every elder, every rival eager to see her triumph or to see her fall. She stood in the circle once more, battered but unbowed. Her task was simple, to lift the ceremonial blade from the stone. Many before had tried, few had succeeded. Alara stepped forward, her heart thundering. She laid her hand on the hilt, and at once the mark on her wrist flared, blindingly bright. The blade came free with a sound like thunder. The crowd gasped. She turned, lifting it high, and for the first time she saw no mockery in their eyes, only silence, awe, and fear. But before triumph could settle in her chest, a sound split the air. A cough, harsh, sharp, violent. The king staggered, one hand clutching his chest. His silver eyes widened, not with fury, but with something she had never seen in him before. Weakness. My king, Alara cried, rushing to his side as he collapsed, his body heavy in her arms. The court erupted in chaos. Healers rushed forward, their hands glowing as they pressed them to his chest. And then, silence. One healer, pale and trembling, looked up. This was no natural faint, she whispered, her voice carrying through the stunned amphitheater. Someone has cursed him. The king's body lay heavy in her arms, his breath ragged, his skin burning hot against her trembling hands. The healers swarmed, chanting ancient words, their palms glowing with pale light. Yet nothing shifted. His chest still heaved with effort, his jaw clenched as if fighting unseen chains. Alara, one of the elders began, his voice sharp with suspicion. This curse. Silence, she snapped, her voice breaking through the chaos with a strength she had never known. She pressed herself closer to the king, cradling his head against her chest. No one will lay blame until he breathes freely again. If he falls, It will not be from your whispers." Her words rang out, silencing the amphitheater. For the first time, she did not sound like a wolfless omega or a trembling bride. She sounded like a queen. But even so, her heart bled. His silver eyes, so fierce, so unyielding, were dimming. "No," she whispered, clutching him tighter, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You don't get to leave me. Not now." The elders muttered, their gazes darting toward one another. Finally, one stepped forward, his face grim beneath his hood. "There is one way," he said softly. "But it is forbidden." Ilara's head snapped up. "Tell me." The elder hesitated, then glanced at the mark glowing faintly on her wrist. "The bond between you is incomplete. She, wolfless," he cursed. "It is imbalance. The only chance is the ritual of the bite." A ripple of shock moved through the court. Whispers hissed like serpents. Ilara frowned, her heart pounding. "What is it?" The elder's eyes darkened. "He must bite you. Not as a claiming, not as a mark of matehood, but as an awakening. His fangs in your flesh, his power poured into your blood. If destiny wills it, your wolf will rise. Only then may his curse be broken." Her stomach twisted. The image burned through her mind, the king's teeth sinking into her skin, tearing past bone, binding her to him in ways she could never undo. She looked down at him. His lips moved faintly, her name escaping as a broken rasp. His strength was fading fast. "Ilara." It was enough. "Do it," she whispered. The elder's eyes widened. "Child, once begun, it cannot be undone. His bite may kill you if your wolf does not answer." "I don't care." Her voice rang sharp and desperate. "If he dies, I die with him. Do it." They carried him to the ritual chamber, a sanctum of stone and silver, etched with ancient runes that shimmered in the dim light. Candles burned low, filling the air with the scent of smoke and iron. Ilara lay beside him, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might shatter her chest. The king's eyes fluttered open, silver dimmed but still alive. His hand groped blindly until it found hers, gripping with what strength remained. "Ilara." His voice was a growl wrapped in a plea. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do," she whispered, leaning close until their foreheads touched. Her breath mingled with his, hot and trembling. "Bite me. If this is the only way, then do it. I am not afraid of your teeth." His chest shuddered, torn between restraint and need. His lips brushed hers, not a kiss but a ghost of one, burning in its almostness. "You tempt the beast," he rasped, his breath hot against her mouth. "Then let it wake," she breathed. For a moment, he hesitated, then his control shattered. With a growl that shook the chamber, he seized her, pulling her beneath him. His body caged hers, heavy and trembling with fury, with hunger, with the desperate need to bind her to him. His hand cradled the back of her head, forcing her throat to arch, exposing the delicate line of her neck. "Ilara," he growled, silver fire blazing in his eyes. "Once I bite, you are mine beyond crown, beyond vow, mine in blood. Do you yield?" Her lips parted, her chest heaving, her pulse racing beneath her skin. "I yield," she whispered. His fangs sank into her flesh. The pain was searing, white-hot, shooting through her veins like lightning. She gasped, her body arching against his, torn between agony and heat. His mouth clamped tighter, his breath rough against her skin as his power poured into her. The world exploded. Heat and shadow, fire and silver. Her mark burned so brightly she thought her skin would tear apart. Her vision blurred, her bones trembling as something deep, something buried stirred inside her. Her wolf. For the first time it rose not as a faint whisper but as a presence vast and wild, pressing against her soul. Her lips parted in a cry, her eyes snapping open, only to see her reflection in his gaze. Silver. Her eyes glowed silver. "Ilara." His voice broke, reverent and trembling. He lifted his head, lips stained crimson from the bite, his hand cradling her cheek as though she were glass. "You are awakening." Her chest heaved. She felt it, her wolf pacing within, restless, alive. The bond between them surged, pulling tighter, fiercer like molten iron, fusing them as one. And then, before she could stop herself, she reached for him. Her hand fisted in his shirt, dragging him down. Their lips met. It was no tentative brush, no restrained almost. It was deep, consuming, an explosion of everything unsaid. His mouth claimed hers with a hunger that left her trembling, his kiss rough and desperate, tasting of blood and fire and forever. She kissed him back with equal ferocity, pouring all her pain, all her fury, all her newfound strength into it. The world vanished, only his mouth on hers, his hand tangled in her hair, his chest pressed against hers. And yet, through the haze, through the fire, another voice slipped inside her mind. Unwelcome. Familiar. Ilara. Her breath caught, lips still locked with the king's. The voice was not his. It was Kaelen. "I'm still inside you." The voice whispered, velvet and cruel, echoing through the thread of their broken bond. "Don't forget me." Her body went rigid in the king's arms, even as his kiss deepened, even as her wolf stirred with fierce hunger. Because in that perfect blazing moment, her past had clawed its way back into her soul. The palace never slept. Not really. Even in the hushed hours of the night, whispers echoed through its endless halls, guards exchanging warnings, servants trading secrets, nobles murmuring behind velvet curtains. But tonight, the silence felt heavier, thick with unseen eyes and bloodless hands. Ilara walked those halls as though the walls themselves listened. Since the ritual of the bite, everything felt sharper, her senses, her instincts, her fear. Her wolf was awake now, prowling restlessly beneath her skin, growling at shadows, tugging her toward truths she was not yet ready to face. The king had not left her side. His presence was like gravity itself, impossible to ignore, impossible to escape. He moved with her, silent but watchful, his arm brushing hers with every step. His silver eyes glowed faintly in the dark, not dimmed by his near death but sharper, burning with the fire of a predator denied his kill. They searched together, for betrayal, for the dagger that had not struck her yet but had already struck him. And with every door they opened, every ally they questioned, the threads of treachery coiled tighter around them. It was in the council chamber that the truth cracked open. Ilara stood beside the king, her hand resting lightly on the curve of the table. The advisors assembled, their faces shadowed by the candlelight, eyes darting between one another with barely veiled fear. They had seen their king collapse. They had watched Ilara rise from trial with silver in her gaze. The air was heavy with awe and suspicion. The king's voice was a low rumble. "Someone among you has let poison slip into my veins. Someone who thinks themselves clever enough to break me." His gaze cut through them one by one as if weighing the worth of their souls. "I will find you, and when I do, death will not be enough." Ilara's wolf stirred, restless. She scanned the room, her senses keening, and then a scent. Beneath the sharp tang of ink, parchment, and nervous sweat, something metallic drifted to her. Not blood, not steel, something colder, older. Her gaze snapped to the man at the king's right hand, Lord Maelor, the most trusted of all the king's advisors, the one who had raised toasts at every feast, who had sworn loyalty at every council, who had walked beside the throne for years. His hair was streaked with silver, his robes heavy with respect. Her stomach turned. It couldn't be him. And yet, her wolf growled, lips curled inside her. The king's eyes flicked toward her, reading her tension, then followed her gaze. Lord Maelor. For a moment, silence held the chamber like glass, and then the king spoke, his voice like ice breaking. "You." The advisor froze, his hand hovering above the table. Ilara's heart slammed against her ribs. She saw it then. The twitch in his jaw, the bead of sweat tracing his temple, the way his eyes darted toward the nearest guard not with fear but calculation. The wolf inside her howled. "Seize him!" she cried. Chaos erupted. The guards lunged, but Mailer moved with a speed unnatural for his age, his cloak whipping through the air as he dashed for the exit. The king's roar shook the chamber, his power bursting outward like a storm. Alara had never seen him like this. Every inch of him raw fury and betrayal, silver fire blazing in his eyes. He slammed a hand to the table, splintering it, before vanishing in a blur of motion. By the time the guards dragged Maelor back, his hands bound in silver chains, his face was twisted into something unrecognizable, hatred and hunger, and something darker still. Alara's blood ran cold, because when he lifted his eyes to her, they glowed, not with wolf light, not with mortal fear, but with the shadow of something older. "I warned you, girl," Maelor hissed, his voice crackling like embers. "The king is not the only one who has watched you." Her knees trembled, but the king's arm wrapped around her, holding her steady. His chest pressed to her back, his breath hot against her ear as he growled words meant only for her. "Do not fear him. You are mine." Her body melted back into his, the claim wrapping around her as tightly as his arms. And in that moment, despite the court, despite the betrayal, despite the chains rattling at her feet, his lips found hers. It was not a kiss of comfort. It was fire and steel, rough and desperate, his mouth crashing into hers with a force that stole the air from her lungs. She yielded instantly, her fingers fisting in the fabric of his tunic, clinging as though he were the only thing keeping her from shattering. The chamber spun away. There was only his mouth, hot and commanding, his hand cradling the back of her head, his tongue sweeping against hers in a kiss that claimed, demanded, promised. It left her trembling, her wolf howling with hunger and belonging. When he finally tore his lips from hers, his forehead pressed against hers, his voice was a raw growl. "They will not break us, Alara, not even those closest." She nodded, her breath ragged, her lips swollen from his kiss. But inside, a seed of fear grew. Because if betrayal could come from his most trusted hand, where else might it lie? That night, the palace was too quiet. Alara lay tangled in sheets of silk, her wolf restless beneath her skin. Sleep crept in fits and starts, her mind clouded with the memory of Maelor's glowing eyes, his words slithering like poison through her thoughts. And then the dream came. Her sister, bound in chains of iron, her face streaked with tears. She reached for Alara with trembling hands, her voice breaking into sobs. "Alara, help me. Please. Don't leave me here." Alara's heart broke. She tried to run to her, but the ground beneath her feet turned to shadow, swallowing every step. No matter how she fought, her sister remained just beyond reach, her screams echoing into endless night. "Alara!" She jerked awake, chest heaving, sweat dampening her skin. The chamber was silent, the king's arm heavy around her waist. His breath was steady, his body radiating warmth against her back. But the vision clung like claws, her wolf pacing anxiously within her. It was more than a dream, her instincts whispered. It was a call. Her hands trembled as she pushed back the sheets, trying to steady her breath. And that was when she saw it. On the pillow beside her head, a lock of hair, dark, wet, stained with blood. Her sister's hair. Her breath caught, her body freezing against the mattress as the world narrowed to that single bloody strand. The bloody lock of hair still haunted her thoughts, a coil of dread she had buried deep so as not to shatter before the king's steady gaze. She hadn't told him, not yet. Not when enemies pressed on all sides. Not when trust had become so fragile. But as night fell, the shadows pressed heavier around the palace, and with them came a different hunger, one she could not silence, no matter how fiercely she tried. The king sensed it too. They stood together on the balcony, silver moonlight bathing their skin in pale glow. the night wind brushing against them like whispers of fate. Below, the palace courtyards were lined with guards and fire-lit patrols, the scent of iron and smoke drifting faintly into the air. He stood close behind her, his chest grazing her back, his heat wrapping around her in a way that both calmed and ignited her. His hand lingered at her waist, his thumb brushing small, almost innocent circles into her side. Almost. "Ilara." His voice was low, threaded with the weight of command and something far softer. "You walk as though you are carrying a war on your shoulders alone." She turned, meeting his silver gaze. It burned, not only with fire, not only with the strength of a king, but with something he tried to hide. Desperation, longing, the kind that stripped even the strongest bare. "I don't know how to carry all of this," she whispered. "The betrayal, the visions, us." The corner of his mouth twitched, a faint smirk breaking through the steel of his expression. "Us," he repeated, tasting the word as though it were wine. His hand rose to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing the edge of her lower lip. "That at least is simple. You are mine, and I—" His voice broke, softened. "Am yours." Her chest constricted. She wanted to deny it, to push him away, to shield herself from the danger of loving a man like him. But her wolf stirred restlessly, pressing against her chest, whispering one word in the marrow of her bones: "Mate." And then his lips were on hers. The kiss was not tender, not careful. It was fire and storm, raw and consuming, as though he had waited lifetimes to claim her and would not be denied a second longer. His mouth moved against hers with desperate hunger, parting her lips, stealing her breath, drawing her into him until she couldn't tell where she ended, and he began. Her hands clutched his shoulders, nails biting through the fabric of his tunic as she pulled him closer. He groaned into her mouth, a sound rough and deep that sent shivers racing down her spine. When he broke the kiss, it was only to drag his lips down her throat, teeth grazing lightly at her pulse before returning to her mouth, fiercer, deeper. She melted into him, her body trembling, her wolf howling for more. The night blurred. The balcony gave way to silken sheets, the weight of his body above hers, the press of his skin against hers. Their breaths mingled, ragged, broken. Words slipped between kisses, vows of possession, of devotion, of need so violent it nearly broke her. She felt it then, the bond, the true sealing of their union, a tether snapping into place deep inside her, binding her to him in a way no betrayal could sever, no enemy could destroy. Destiny. Her wolf surged, her eyes flashing silver as she surrendered to it, to him, to them. The night became theirs, consumed in heat and desperation, the kind of surrender that burned away fear and left only truth. And though the details blurred into fire and shadow, one truth rang clear in her soul. They had consummated their bond. She was his queen, he was her king, and nothing would ever be the same again. The peace did not last. Alarms shattered the night. The sound of horns blared through the palace halls, shouts of guards clashing against steel, and the pounding of footsteps shaking the stone. Ilara jolted upright, the king already leaping from the bed, pulling on dark trousers and reaching for the blade at his side. His silver eyes burned, fierce and deadly. "Stay here," he commanded, voice sharp as steel. Her wolf snarled at the thought, at the order. She threw aside the sheets, standing bare but unbroken before him. "I will not cower while they come for us." His gaze lingered on her, pride and fury warring in his expression. For a heartbeat he softened, then the doors burst open. She spun, heart slamming against her ribs. A masked warrior surged forward faster than the guards who followed, his movements fluid, trained, lethal. In a blur, he was on her. The king roared, but before he could cross the distance, the intruder slammed Ilara back against the bed, his gloved hand pinning her wrists above her head. His mask gleamed in the moonlight, a cruel sneer etched into the steel. His breath brushed hot against her ear as he whispered, low and vicious, "The king cannot save you this time, little wolf." The chamber stank of blood and smoke. The intruders had vanished into shadow as quickly as they had come, their retreat leaving only broken guards, shattered steel, and the ringing echo of alarm horns through the palace. Ilara stumbled to her feet, her chest heaving, her wrists still burning where the masked warrior had held her down. Her wolf snarled within, restless, unsettled, its hackles raised at a threat that had not yet passed. The king stood at the door, his chest heaving, a bloody slash across his forearm, his blade dripping crimson. His silver eyes scanned her, wild with fury and something far more dangerous, fear. "Ilara," he growled, his voice rough, breaking as he reached for her. "Did he hurt you?" She shook her head, though her voice caught. "No, but he could have." His jaw clenched, the silver glow in his eyes sharpening to steel. "Not while I still breathe." He pulled her against him then, his arms wrapping around her with a ferocity that nearly crushed her. She sank into his embrace, trembling, her lips brushing against the curve of his neck. He kissed her hair, her temple, the corner of her mouth, desperate and rough, as though he needed to convince himself she was still there, still his. Their lips met, deep, searing, his tongue sliding against hers in a kiss that was almost violent in its need. She gasped into him, clinging to his shoulders as his mouth claimed hers again and again, the taste of iron and fire flooding her senses. But even as the kiss consumed her, the scent reached her, familiar, unmistakable. Her body went rigid. No, it couldn't be. And yet, Ilara, her name whispered like a prayer. She tore her lips from the king's, her chest heaving as she spun toward the wreckage of the doorway. Kaelen stood there. He was a ghost and yet solid, his figure framed by the flickering torchlight of the ruined hall. His once flawless face was scarred now, a jagged mark slicing down his cheek. His jaw hardened, his eyes dark with something that wasn't only regret. His clothes were torn, stained with dirt and blood, but he was alive, and he was staring at her as though she were still his. "Ilara," he breathed, stepping forward, his voice breaking with both longing and rage. "I came back for you." Her heart stopped. Her lungs forgot how to move. For a moment, it was as though the palace, the battle, even the king's fierce presence faded into silence. All she could hear was the echo of Kaelen's voice, the man who had once promised her forever, the man who had shattered her with betrayal. Her chest ached. The wolf inside her whimpered, "You..." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "You kissed her, my sister. You destroyed me." Kaelen's face twisted, agony flashing through his eyes. He stepped closer, raising his scarred hand as if to reach for her. "I was tricked, manipulated. I never wanted her. I only wanted you." Her throat tightened, her vision blurring. She hated him. She wanted to hate him. And yet her body remembered. The stolen glances, the nights of whispered vows, the warmth of belonging she had once thought unbreakable. The king's growl split the air, low and primal. He moved, stepping in front of her, his silver eyes blazing like fire as he bared his teeth. "You dare to step foot here after what you did? After you touched what is mine?" Kaelen's gaze cut to him, dark and venomous. "You think you own her? You who swooped in when she was broken, when she had nowhere else to go?" His voice rose, sharp and savage. "You don't love her. You use her. You mark her because you fear losing her." Ilara's breath caught, her body trembling as both men stared each other down like predators circling prey. The king's voice was deadly calm, though his hand clenched around his sword hilt. "Careful, boy. You walk on ground that will soon be your grave." Kaelen took another step forward, the torchlight glinting off the scar that slashed across his cheek. His eyes, once soft when they looked at her, now burned with desperate fire. He lifted his hand, pointing directly at the king, his voice breaking into a snarl. You were never her true mate. Ilara's heart slammed against her ribs, her knees weakening beneath her. Kaelen's voice cracked through the chamber like thunder. I was. The air inside the ruined chamber felt heavy, crackling with more than the stench of blood. Rage had its own scent, sharp, metallic, suffocating, and it bled off the Lycan King in waves. Ilara could barely breathe. Her chest rose and fell, her wolf restless beneath her skin, caught between two fates that stood before her. Kaelen's words still rang like a curse. You were never her true mate. I was. For a heartbeat, the chamber was silent. Then the king moved. The sound was a snarl, low, primal, tearing through the silence like claws ripping flesh. In one blink, he was upon Kaelen, his sword flashing like silver fire, his strength too fast, too brutal. Steel clashed, sparks flew. Kaelen stumbled back, blocking the king's deadly strike, but he was weaker, slower. His wolf stirred, but it was nothing compared to the monstrous force that drove the Lycan King. The court had gathered outside the ruined hall, their whispers spilling in like a river, gasps echoing as they watched the two males collide in violence. He'll kill him. He dares challenge the king. But did you hear? Her true mate. Whispers swirled around Ilara like smoke, feeding the storm already ripping her apart. Kaelen ducked a savage swing, his breath ragged, blood dripping from a gash along his arm. Ilara, he cried, his voice desperate, straining. You know it. You feel it. The bond between us was real. The king roared, his blade cutting across Kaelen's chest, sending him crashing into the stone wall with bone-breaking force. Dust rained from the ceiling. You dare speak her name in my presence? His voice was a growl, deeper than thunder, his silver eyes blazing. Ilara screamed, her hands clutching her chest, as she saw Kaelen slide down the wall, coughing blood. The king raised his sword for the killing blow, his fury wild, unstoppable. No! Her voice split the hall, sharper than steel. The king froze, his blade inches from Kaelen's throat. Ilara ran forward, throwing herself between them, her arms spread wide, her body trembling but her voice unyielding. Stop! You'll kill him! The king's chest heaved, his silver gaze locked on hers, feral, murderous. His knuckles whitened around his sword, but slowly, very slowly, he lowered the blade. The court gasped as silence swept the hall. Ilara turned, her eyes burning, staring down at Kaelen's broken form. His gaze lifted to hers, blood streaking his scarred face, his lips trembling. You still care, he rasped. Her throat closed. She said nothing, but the silence itself was an answer, and the whispers began anew. She protects him, divided. Does she love them both? The king's growl silenced the murmurs, but Ilara felt the weight of every eye upon her, her loyalty questioned, her heart torn. That night, the palace was quieter, though the storm in her chest was anything but. Ilara lay in the king's chamber, her body curled against his. His arm was heavy around her waist, his breath warm against her shoulder. He had kissed her after the court dispersed, a kiss that burned with fury and desperation, claiming her again and again until her lips felt raw, swollen, her body trembling. It had not been gentle. It had not been tender. It had been fire and storm and hunger, his mouth devouring hers in long, consuming kisses that left her dizzy. His lips pressed against the line of her jaw, her throat back to her mouth, again and again, until she was gasping against him, clutching his tunic with trembling fingers. That kiss haunted her still, even as she drifted into uneasy sleep. It had tasted of blood and possessiveness, of a king who would burn the world before he lost her. But as she slept, the darkness moved. A shadow slipped into the chamber, silent as death. The air shifted, colder, her wolf stirring uneasily in her dreams. She groaned, half waking, her fingers brushing something cold. A blade. Her eyes snapped open. She froze. The weapon was in her hand, its surface slick, coated with something that glistened faintly in the moonlight. Venom. Her wolf recoiled instantly, recognizing the poison for what it was. And then, a voice, low and chilling, hissed near her ear, though no form was seen. "End him now, or you'll never survive what's coming." Her pulse thundered. Her hand shook, the knife cold against her skin. She turned her head. The king lay beside her, his arm still heavy across her waist, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm of sleep. His face, so fierce in the day, looked almost unguarded now, his silver lashes casting shadows across his cheeks. Her breath hitched, her heart in her throat. The blade trembled in her hand. The whisper lingered. "Strike, or die." And the scene froze there. Ilara wide awake, the venomous knife in her hand, the king sleeping soundly at her side. The knife still haunted her hands. Ilara had hidden it before dawn, burying the venomous blade deep within the crack of a stone wall no one touched. She told herself it was safe there, out of reach. But the memory of the whisper clung to her ears, coiling around her like smoke. "End him now, or you'll never survive what's coming." She hadn't struck. She couldn't, but she hadn't told him either. And that silence burned. The Lycan King, as if sensing her unrest, had kissed her fiercely before leaving her chamber that morning. His lips pressed hard against hers, long, unyielding, his tongue sliding past her lips until she was dizzy from the heat of him. His kiss was both a vow and a warning, his dominance swallowing the air between them. "Stay near me," he had murmured against her mouth, his voice rough, his silver eyes dark. "The wolves are stirring. Enemies will come, and when they do, I want them to know you are mine." Her heart had trembled at his words, but part of her had melted too, aching for more. That was when the attack came. The courtyard was deceptively quiet when Ilara crossed it at midday, the sun spilling in pale light. She was flanked by 2 guards, her steps slow, her thoughts heavy with Kaelen's broken gaze, the king's desperate kisses, and the blade hidden in stone. The silence broke in an instant. Figures dropped from the balconies above, masked and armed, their blades gleaming. Dozens of them. The guards barely had time to shout before steel-cut flesh, screams slicing the air. "Ilara!" one of them yelled, then fell, blood spraying across the marble. Her heart thundered, her wolf inside her clawing violently against her ribs. Run. Fight. Awaken. The attackers swarmed. A blade slashed toward her. She ducked, but another caught her arm, tearing crimson across her skin. The pain ripped a cry from her lips, and with it, the dam inside her broke, her body arched back, her breath stolen by something ancient, something fierce. Her wolf. It tore free in a blaze of silver light. Where flesh had been, fur erupted, shimmering silver, luminous in the sun. Her scream became a howl, so wild it shook the marble beneath her feet. Gasps echoed across the courtyard as her form shifted fully. A silver wolf, magnificent, rare, terrifying. Her eyes glowed like molten moonlight as she lunged, jaws snapping, claws slashing. Every movement was primal grace, precise and brutal. She was no longer just Ilara. She was predator incarnate, and her enemies fell before her in sprays of blood and torn armor. Her wolf reveled in it. Each strike, each kill, came with savage satisfaction. The attackers tried to retreat, but there was no mercy in her, only the dance of death, and then, "Enough!" The voice cut through the frenzy, low and commanding. Her wolf stilled. The king stood at the edge of the courtyard, bloodied from his own battles, his silver gaze locked on her with awe and hunger. His sword dripped red, but his lips curved in a dangerous smile. "Ilara," he whispered, though it was not her name he spoke to. It was her wolf. Magnificent. Her chest heaved, fur glistening with crimson. She padded forward, her silver form towering, her breath steaming in the cool air. When she reached him, she lifted her muzzle, and to the shock of every soldier still alive, she pressed her wolf's face into his chest. The king's hand sank into her fur, slow, reverent. His other hand cupped her jaw, tilting her muzzle upward. And then, his lips brushed hers. Not human lips to human lips, but something more. A kiss that burned across the boundary of flesh and spirit, binding wolf to man, mate to king. It was long, intense, consuming, the kind of kiss that left the world watching in stunned silence, as if they had no right to see. Her wolf whimpered into his mouth, trembling with need and relief. His tongue traced the seam of her muzzle, his kiss deepening with a desperate passion. When she finally shifted back, trembling, her naked body pressed against his cloak swept around her instantly, shielding her from the court's eyes but not from his gaze. "Mine," he growled against her lips, kissing her again, deeper, slower, until she was moaning softly into his mouth, her fingers clutching his tunic, her body weak with surrender. But even as his kiss drowned her wolf whispered inside her head, its voice sharp, feral, impossible to ignore. "Not everyone around you is what they seem." Elara pulled back, her lips swollen, her chest heaving. The king frowned, sensing her shift in mood. And then, her wolf bared its teeth, not at the king, not at the soldiers, but at a figure in the shadows just beyond the broken archway. Her breath caught. Her wolf growled low. The figure stepped into the light. And it was someone Elara loved. The silver wolf within her was still trembling when Elara's vision cleared. And there he was. Kaelen, scarred, desperate, eyes burning with that familiar ache she once thought eternal. His face was drawn, his chest heaving, his gaze locked on her with equal parts guilt and longing. "Elara." His voice cracked as though the word itself might break him. Her wolf snarled. The king stepped forward instantly, shielding her with his body, his arm curling around her waist, drawing her close. He radiated power, possession, fury. But Kaelen didn't flinch. His eyes darted between them, lingering on her swollen lips, her trembling body still wrapped in the king's cloak. "You think he saved you?" Kaelen hissed, his voice edged with pain. "You think this Lycan King appeared by accident? He's been watching you for years, waiting, and I knew it. I let it happen. His jaw tightened. "I was forced into betrayal so you'd turn to him." The world tilted. Elara's breath hitched. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely there. Kaelen's eyes glistened. "I never wanted your sister. I never wanted to hurt you. But I knew, if I broke you, you'd fall into his arms. He was always the one pulling the strings." "No." The king's voice was thunder. He pulled her tighter against him, silver fire blazing in his eyes. Lies. Desperate lies from a broken mate who lost what was his. Don't listen to him, Elara. But the damage was done. Her heart twisted violently. Had Kaelen betrayed her out of lust? Or out of some twisted design to keep her alive? To deliver her into the king's hands? And if so, what did that make the king? Savior or captor? The chamber fell silent. Soldiers watched with bated breath. Her wolf paced inside her, restless, growling at both men. "Elara," Kaelen begged, taking a step forward, his scarred hand outstretched. "I am still your mate. That bond hasn't died. I loved you before he even knew your name. Choose me." The king's grip tightened around her. His voice dropped, low and dangerous, vibrating against her skin. "Or choose me," he murmured against her ear, so soft only she could hear. "The one who claimed you, who gave you power, who will burn the world to keep you. Elara, you are my queen, my soul, my everything." Her heart tore in two. The bond to Kaelen still flickered inside her, a faint echo of a love that once was. But the pull of the king was undeniable, fierce, primal. He consumed her with his fire, and even her wolf bent to him. Her lips parted, her chest ached, and then with trembling hands she turned and pressed her body fully into the king's. Kaelen's breath shattered, a broken sound. "I choose him," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling yet unyielding. The king's eyes widened, burning silver, his chest heaving as though the words struck something primal within him. Then, without hesitation, he seized her mouth with his. The kiss was slow at first, painfully slow. His lips coaxed hers, soft, searching, drawing her deeper and deeper until she melted into him, her hands curling into his tunic. She gasped into his mouth, the warmth of him overwhelming, his taste addictive. But then it turned. His hand slid into her hair, fisting it gently, angling her mouth to his as his kiss deepened, devouring, demanding. His tongue claimed hers, tangling, stroking, until she whimpered against him. His other hand dragged her closer, crushing her body to his chest as if he could merge her into himself. The world blurred, her knees buckled. The kiss burned from slow, intoxicating heat into wild hunger, their mouths clashing, breath stolen, lips bruising. She moaned softly into him, the sound desperate, and he swallowed it greedily. It wasn't just a kiss, it was possession, a vow, a surrender. And she gave into it, clinging to him, consumed, undone. Kaelen turned away, agony etched across his face. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared interrupt. Ilara gasped when the king finally pulled back, his forehead pressed to hers, his lips hovering over her swollen mouth. His breath came hard and uneven. "You are mine," he growled softly, almost brokenly. "Always mine." And then, the ground shook. A deep rumble tore through the palace, rattling the marble, sending cracks through the walls. Torches flared wildly, flames bending toward an unseen force. Every wolf in the hall froze, ears pricked, tails low, eyes wide. The voice came next, ancient, booming, heavy with power that tasted of death and eternity. "The game is not over, little wolf." The words reverberated in her bones, shaking her wolf to its core. Ilara clutched the king's tunic, trembling, her lips still burning from his kiss as the world around them threatened to shatter. The palace shook as if the earth itself had risen in rage. Walls cracked, banners fell, and dust rained from the ceiling. Ilara clung to the Lycan King's arm as that voice, ancient, echoing, terrible, rolled through the ruins of the court. "The game is not over, little wolf." The wolves knelt instinctively, their bodies trembling under the unseen weight of it. Even the air grew heavy, pressing down on lungs, choking breaths. Ilara's wolf bared its teeth inside her chest, restless, snarling at the unseen threat. Kaelen had already vanished into the shadows, his face pale and torn before the tremors began. She wondered if he fled, or if something darker had taken him. But there was no time to dwell. The king's hand tightened on hers. "With me," he growled, silver light burning in his eyes. "Always with me." And then the attack came. They poured in from the broken gates, creatures cloaked in shadow, half-wolves twisted with black fire, their eyes glowing like dying embers. Assassins, traitors, beasts that should not exist. The king roared, shifting mid-leap, his form bursting into a massive Lycan, taller than any wolf, fur black, streaked with silver. His claws ripped through stone, his fangs gleaming like blades. Ilara's body pulsed with silver light. Her wolf rose within her, glorious and unrestrained. She shifted with a cry, her form blazing into the courtyard, fur gleaming, eyes burning moonlight. Together, they descended on the enemy. They fought not as separate wolves, but as one. His power, her fire. His fury, her grace. When his claws tore, her fangs followed. When her howl shook the air, his roar made it thunder. Enemies fell in waves. Their bond burned hotter with every strike, every brush of fur against fur, every shared glance in the chaos. The court gasped to witness it, the queen and her king uniting like a storm. But the battle would not be won easily. From the smoke, Kaelen emerged again, his face shadowed, his body trembling with something unholy. His scars burned black, spreading across his skin like veins of ash. Ilara. His voice was hollow, wrong. His eyes glowed, not gold, not amber, but crimson. Her wolf froze. The king snarled, stepping before her, fangs bared. He's been touched. Kaelen's lips curled in a broken smile. I told you, Ilara. It was never your choice. You were always his piece, always his prize. And then the crimson fire burst from his chest. The final fight tore the night apart. Kaelen moved like a demon, striking with speed beyond Alpha, beyond Lycan. His blade clashed with the king's claws, sparks flying, steel screeching. Ilara, he cried, even as he fought. He has you trapped, don't you see? You were mine first. Her wolf howled back, a sound of fury and grief. She lunged, silver fangs snapping, throwing Kaelen back into shattered stone. No, she whispered through the bond, her voice a storm. I was never yours. Not truly. Not after what you did. The king's silver fire blazed higher. With Ilara at his side, his strikes became unstoppable, each movement guided by her wolf's light. And when they struck together, his claws tearing, her fangs biting, they drove Kaelen to his knees. Tears burned her eyes as she watched him fall, the crimson fire leaving his body like smoke. His last words were broken, barely audible. I loved you, always. And then he was gone. Silence fell at last. The courtyard was drenched in blood, littered with the bodies of beasts and traitors. The survivors bowed low, trembling before the sight of their king and their new queen, fur streaked with silver and shadow, eyes glowing with moonlight, standing victorious. The king shifted back, his massive form folding into his bloodied, breathless body. Ilara followed, collapsing into his arms, shaking from the toll of battle. He cupped her face, his silver eyes fierce, desperate. You are mine, he whispered hoarsely. Not fate's, not his, not anyone's. Mine. Her lips trembled. And you are mine. Then he kissed her, slow at first, aching, tender, lips pressing softly as though afraid she might break. His thumb brushed her cheek, wiping blood, his mouth tasting her tears. She melted into him, whimpering against his lips. But then the kiss deepened. His mouth claimed hers, his tongue sliding against hers, coaxing, demanding, until she moaned into him. His hand tightened at the back of her neck, his other arm pulling her body flush to his. The kiss grew wild, desperate, teeth clashing, lips bruising. His hunger poured into her, his need raw and consuming. She gave back everything, her body trembling, her fingers buried in his hair, pulling him closer, closer, until there was no space, no breath, nothing but the fire of them devouring each other. When they finally tore apart, gasping, the blood moon had risen fully above them. Her wolf howled inside her. His Lycan growled low, and together, they consummated their bond, not in flesh alone, but in spirit, soul, and destiny. The coronation was swift. The court bent the knee. The wolves howled her name as queen, silver fire burning across the sky in honor of their union. Ilara stood at his side, crowned in silver, her wolf radiant, her heart no longer torn. For the first time, she was not wolfless. She was not broken. She was queen, and he was hers. Forever. Peace lasted only a moment. From the ruins of the battlefield, the air thickened once more. The earth cracked. Darkness spilled like oil, rising, shaping itself into a figure tall and cloaked, eyes glowing not silver, not gold, something older, something vast. Every wolf cowered, tails tucked, eyes wide. The king's body stiffened. His arm closed protectively around Ilara. The figure raised its head. Its voice was a whisper and a roar, older than time itself. Did you think it ended here? Its glowing eyes turned directly to Ilara. You are bound to me, little wolf. I am the first, the forgotten, the Lycan god. The blood moon flared crimson, and Ilara's silver mark burned hotter than ever.
The story pauses, but the fire never dies. Here in Tales by Jenny Moon, the hunt only waits for the next night. If you survived this chapter, step deeper. Share your presence with the pack so it knows who dares to return. The night never sleeps, and neither do the things within it. Rest if you must. Keep the moon close. And if you feel eyes on you, or a whisper at your door, don't panic. It's only a story, until the moon finds you.